Hello and welcome to episode 26 of the Motivational Millennial Podcast. Today we are going to be talking with transformational wizard Frank J, who has become a friend of ours and is just a force of nature. And I won't spoil too much of his awesomeness up front, but I think you're really going to enjoy this interview. And before we jump in, I did want to touch base with Ivy here. Hey, Ivy, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
I'm great, thanks. So, as our regular listeners may remember, you've been doing a coaching certification program around coactive coaching. Would you mind just refreshing us on what that is? And we'd love to hear how it's been going.
Yeah, well, thank you for asking. It's been going really well. I like to describe coactive coaching as a relationship that's built on trust and collaboration with the sole purpose of helping you achieve your goals and your dreams. And I'm about halfway through certification, and I must say that it's definitely deepened my understanding of the value and importance of the coaching relationship. It's also given me the opportunity to learn and grow as a human in ways that I didn't anticipate, and as a business owner in ways that I didn't anticipate as well. But I absolutely love this work. Every time I have a session, I just feel so energized and fulfilled about life, because it is just an absolute privilege to be partners with people on their journeys through the challenges, stand by their side, celebrate the victories, and it's just been really wonderful.
Yeah, what have you seen so far? You've been doing a fair amount of coaching, I know, recently. Have you been learning more about yourself as part of that process? Or have you seen some transformations with your clients?
I think one of the things that stands out is how incredibly brave people are, and also how much they underestimate their bravery. Because the people who show up to these sessions and the people who come to them often are in places of transition or places where they're feeling stuck or there's not a lot of clarity, which isn't always the most empowering place to be. So it's not always, somebody coming into coaching like, I'm doing really wonderfully in my life and I just need some additional support. It's, there's some low places often. And even in the midst of that perception of not being empowered, there's so much strength and bravery and courage and empowerment in them showing up and being there. And I'm always amazed at what comes up for people. Because I'm just there as a support and partner and guide and collaborative communicator, and people are very impressive.
That's awesome. Are you still taking on clients right now?
I am, yeah. I definitely have a few places in my roster. My original goal, because just starting this more professionally and building the practice out more deliberately, I had a little bit of a smaller goal. and now I've really adjusted to what it's like to hold space for people, and I would love to hold space for even more people. And so, yeah, I definitely have some space on my roster for if you are interested in it.
That's great. And so people can just send you an email then? Is that the best way to?
Yeah, absolutely. Ivy at motivationalmillennial.com. And that is millennial, 2 L's, 2 N's, and then another L.
It is always good to double check the spelling of millennial.
I double check it all the time, even when to just make sure. Like, that would be uncool if I misspelled millennial, given that I write it a million times a day.
It's so true. And is there a special discount for our podcast listeners? I know I'm sort of putting you on the spot because we didn't discuss this ahead of time. But
yeah, totally. I mean, I would say, so we'll always start out with a sample session that's free. So it's a half hour free so that you can get a sense of what coaching is. It's the easiest way to understand it is to experience it and get a sense of what it's like to work with me. And for podcast listeners, 20% off your first month. And we'll go from there.
That sounds like a good deal. I think I should do that. I could do some coaching. Awesome. Well, thank you on behalf of our listeners. That's really awesome.
Thanks for asking. This has been fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we appreciate the check-in, and we'll check in with you a little farther down the certification road and see how things are going. And we hope you all will stick around to listen to the after show after our conversation with Frank J, where Ivy and I discuss some of our biggest takeaways. And now, let's hop into the interview.
Welcome to the Motivational Millennial Podcast, where we talk with inspiring members of the millennial generation who are living life with a sense of purpose and achieving their dreams. I'm Ivy LeClaire.
And I'm Blake Brandis.
Our motivational millennial guest today is Frank Jay Porcaro. Frank Jay is an international speaker and coach, as well as the co-founder of an advanced communication retreat company called International Tribe Design. Frank Jay's specialty is in facilitating personal transformation and guiding people to find inner peace and power on their path of success. Welcome to the show, Frank Jay.
Thanks so much. I'm really happy to be here with y'all. Well, I'm not actually here, but remotely, just more so in the presence of your voices.
Yes, we are excited to be in the presence of your voice as well. And really just want to say before we get started on some of the more formal questions that it's been such an awesome time. We met, a couple of years ago. And so Blake and I have had the opportunity to watch your journey over the past couple of years. And you have this amazing energy and just bravery and just getting it. And so you have inspired us so many times. And sometimes we would be like, let's just Frank J it today.
That's right. You are really our spirit animal is what we're saying.
You have become a verb that inspires us to just not, just be passionate and not overthink it anyway. We just want to start out by saying thank you so much for being that for us.
Thank you so much. I love y'all. I'm really grateful for our connection, and it's been a journey for both of us. I mean, all of us, all three of us, for some years now in the similar industry, inspiring others. So I just acknowledge all of our bravery and courage to follow this path. So
wonderful. So we would love to hear more about what you're up to and why you're so passionate about it.
Wow, what I'm up to. I'm up to a lot of things. I would say in a much more simple answer would be that I'm up to following the next logical step on my journey. How that's presenting itself is through actively coaching clients from all over the world. Also, International Tribe Design is our company, our retreat company that I'm co-founded with Daniel Eisenman. And we basically bring people all over the world together that are looking for basically a new tribe. I'm not sure if you all been through this, but when you start to develop yourself, it seems that the old people or the old tribe that you've grown up in, maybe your family or friends, don't necessarily follow the same path as you. So it can get very lonely, and it's sort of, we're seeking our new tribe of like-minded, like-hearted people, one based off of acceptance of who and whatever you are. And so we do retreats all around the world. We have something coming up in Costa Rica in January. I'm also working on some writing and some other awesome things as well.
I love the idea of the tribe and intentionally choosing your tribe. Have there been a few times in your journey when you have had to change those tribes and who you've been around to become the next version of yourself?
Oh, yeah, for sure. As much as I love the idea of a tribe, even to this day, I even have like-minded and like-hearted people around me, but I still stand as an individual. I think it's very important to know who you are without the tribe, because if you're really going to grow, and I'm going to answer your question for sure, but if you're really going to grow on this path, you have to look within. My strength and my clarity comes from within. It's very difficult for me to rely on somebody else and still have that same conviction and energy personally. But as I grew up, I always had friends. However, when I started to question life and ask why, I started to get very curious about wait a second, no one really seems genuinely happy. It seems like they get out of a relationship that they're unhappy with and they find somebody else that's exactly like their old relationship and they're still unhappy, or like they're going from one job to the next job, or they're complaining. And I just realized, wait a second, this doesn't make sense here. There seems to be patterns that are keeping people in this kind of like low standard way of living. And so as I started to question life, my first group of friends, they questioned me. They thought I was weird. They thought I was strange. They made fun of me. They didn't accept me. My own family also put some guilt trips and shame trips on me as well. Not intentionally, but just, I imagine, because I was changing. I was different. And I think that usually the people closest to us in a conscious way sort of want to keep you the way it is, way you've always been for them. It's very scary when someone starts to grow, because you might think they'll grow and leave you behind. And sometimes that actually is true. But I think a lot of people are seeking safety, and they find that safety in relationships. And it's unfortunate because, we can never find safety outside of ourselves, in my opinion. So anyway, for a long time, I was a lone wolf. However, once I consistently started to follow my truth again and again and again, I found other people that were following their truth as well. And I found a tribe of like-minded and like-hearted people. So it all came full circle. And eventually I'm also aware, and I would say wise enough to know that everything is temporary. Even the relationships that I have now, there's always love. And what I'm starting to understand on this path that is changing again and again is that sometimes love is expressed by letting go and really honoring the moments together. So, whatever that looks like, I do believe that we have to find our strength from inside of ourselves. And then we'll find other people that are strong as well, because I believe everything is a mirror of us.
A couple of things really jumped out at me in what you were just saying, and one of them was in regard to how sometimes when you start to grow, people in your tribe or people around you might be uncomfortable with that. And it's so interesting. I think in part it's because change is uncomfortable in general. And so changing for yourself as a person is a big challenge, but also when there's change happening that you can't control, meaning there are people around you that you have grown accustomed to being a certain way, and then they start to change and it becomes uncomfortable. And it's so interesting. I think that there's that resistance to change that's coming, that can come from within, but also from the people around you. And I think it's so great that you have emphasized the relationship with yourself enough to then find community that was comfortable and is comfortable with that kind of change and growth.
Yes. What I like to think is that when you can become comfortable with being uncomfortable, then you got power. We can't change anything outside of ourselves. All we have really in charge of or control over is our internal world, our discipline within inside of ourselves, how we conduct ourselves and our character. That's what we have control over. So, if somebody changes outside of ourselves, I like to anticipate that things are going to change and not be afraid of that, but celebrate that, hey, things are changing. And I think that's the spiritual lesson in it all. It's like, how well can I embrace change and celebrate change? How well can I embrace my dark side just as much as my light side and celebrate that? Celebrate those emotions when I'm scared. Celebrate the emotions when, sad. Celebrate it. And I believe by celebrating it and looking it right in its eye, if you will, you transcend it. And your life, when you have that type of development, life just unfolds in abundant ways. And so the one relationships I feel as humans is a very significant part. The lesson of interpersonal relationships is a very significant part of our evolution. And so there's a lot of growth there. There's a lot of growth to be had. But a lot of it is, I think, again, it's just our place inside the relationship. So two humans come together. They contribute to each other, but they learn from each other. And essentially, they're two individuals basically using each other to grow and experience together. But again, we're on this path as an individual. I believe we're whole, or we have the potential to be whole within inside of ourselves, and it doesn't come from anything or anyone externally. However, we may come into relationships or come into businesses or projects for a certain amount of time, some shorter, some longer, and they're all experiences for us to evolve as a being, as a human being.
And how did you develop that perspective that you as an individual were responsible and empowered to create that destiny for yourself?
To answer that question, I imagine there's subtleties. When you see anybody, whether they're perceived to be very successful or perceived to be very non-successful, there's a lot of little things that had to happen to sculpt them to who they are. So I imagine there's a well-suited, multiple, complex reason of why I look at life this way. But I mean, long story short, I think I just put my faith to the test. And so at 18 years old, when I started to think differently, or accepted that I thought differently, and I started to feel like there was a higher purpose to this all, higher purpose to life. Beyond the beliefs of my childhood, beyond the experiences of my childhood, I just had a feeling, and I think that most people have that inkling. And I always talk about that inkling. Every single individual has an inkling. Some suppress it so deep down inside of themselves, and they're so busy with stimulation or distraction that they can't see or hear it. But some people, they feel it, they know it, and they don't act on it, and some people do act on it. I just had that inkling just like everyone else, and I put it to the test. And so you hear terminologies or information like the laws of the universe or the law of attraction or God and faith, and you hear these ideas and they sound really cute, they sound really fluffy, they sound like, yeah, hope and wish. But I'm like, wait a second, if Spirit says that if I focus, if I put it to the test and I believe with all of my being, then I will reap rewards. Let me put it to the test. And so basically I put that to the test, and I made some very silly decisions. Silly, I guess, in the aspects of like taking big risks financially, taking big risks, leaving relationships, and trusting in that inkling. I spent a lot of time listening internally, listening to my inner voice, basically how my life turned out and the miracles that I would call miracles that happened in my life by putting that faith or putting the law of attraction to the test shows me real congruent or real authentic results that made me even deeper believe. So I guess my perspective came from real life experiences of learning these concepts from curiosity and then going for it.
Could you take us back to one of those experiences, one of those defining moments when you did realize that sense of purpose? Or you made one of those jumps?
Yeah, so one of the jumps I made years ago, I was pursuing youth speaking in particular. And I know, Blake, you do some work in that area. And that was my first goal, to be a youth speaker. And I really, really went for it. You know, I really was developing myself. I was really committed. And before that, I was a fitness manager and director and a personal trainer. And I was doing that for work. And I love that because I was helping people. But I was just ready to go all in with this. And I really wanted to succeed. But I had no connections. I had no money. I quit my job and I borrowed money from my grandma. And I spent all of that money trying to pursue youth speaking. So I invested it in areas that I didn't get a return on my investment. Basically, I spent all of that money. And I wanted to go to these two events in California. I was living in New Jersey at the time. And I believed one was the Tony Robbins event in San Jose. And another one was National Speakers Association annual conference in San Diego. I wanted to go to both of them. And they were coming up because I thought that if I go there, then I can be in proximity with people that were doing things, and they would see my energy, they would see my conviction, and I would get a higher potentiality of getting an opportunity. But I had no money, and I owed my grandma money. Around that time, before I quit my job at the health club or the gym, there was a guy that came in that grew up in an Orthodox Jewish community, and he wanted to build muscle. Like, he lost all this weight on his own. He was really depressed, almost on the verge of suicide because he didn't believe in his way of life that he grew up in, his religion. He was a very scientific mind, and he had no friends. He never had a girlfriend or even kissed a girl, and he was 24 years old at the time. And he came in, I started personal training him and became friends with him. And I was like the coach or the mentor that sort of like helped him transition to the world in a healthy way. You know, I was just being myself. And he really was impacted in a short amount of time. And I was telling him about my dilemma, like I really wanted to go. And he really believed in me because he got the results from my work. And he wound up paying for me to go to these events. So he paid like $4,000 on his credit card for me to go to these events. So I'm putting it all on the line here. Like, now I owe my grandma money. Now I owe my friend money. This is how much I believed in myself. And I believed in my work. So I went there. And I went to the Tony Robbins event on like the third day. I sat next to this guy, which was a young guy, and he had one leg. He had a prosthetic leg at the hip, and he just got out of the military. He got his leg blown off in the military, and he was going around speaking to youth. He was very motivated, and him and I, we were doing exercises together at the seminar, and we just really connected. And he wound up going to the next event with me in San Diego right after the Tony Robbins event. And so we spent some time together, and then we left. I went back home, and nothing happened. And it was so fascinating because now I'm even in more debt. Yeah, I got all this information, but now I was actually sleeping in my Jeep, showering in gyms. I was only making a little bit of money by teaching fitness classes, but I didn't have a source of income, and I was in debt to people and the government as well. Like I had other debt as well. So I'm in a real struggle situation, and my mom and now the people that I love are basically feeling worried and concerned about me. And so I had kind of all the odds against me. And so my doubt started to come in and say like, hey, I need to get a job. So I was thinking about just basically surrendering and getting a job. And about a month later, this guy that I met at the seminars, he calls me and he says, hey, I got another ticket to this other conference in California. It's the world's greatest speaker training by Brendan Bouchard. He's like, you got to come. I was like, oh, I would love to come, but I really can't do it. I just don't have the money to do it. And he's like, well, I really believe in you. He's like, I see that you're really walking your talk. He's like, I'll pay for you. And so he bought my ticket and everything. And so I went to the event, of course, and it was an amazing event. On the third or the fourth day, I was standing in line at the Starbucks with him, and I was thinking about going back home, being even in more trouble financially. And just, even though I had this abundance of information, it's like, how can I apply this with my life right now? Because I'm so distracted by surviving. Apparently he had a bunch of money saved up, and he was really committed to his path as well. It's like, hey, I would love to sponsor you, and you and I can move in together and build our businesses and train and to become some of the best speakers in the world. Him and I moved right outside of San Diego to Mexico for 5 months. We trained, like boot camp trained, and he invested $25,000 into my business for nothing, like with no return back. And so out of all of that, putting it on the line and risking it again and again, seeing that be rewarded was really, really powerful. And that's just one story out of many, many stories of when I put it on the line and I got rewarded.
Oh my gosh, blessing after blessing for you. And it's like, that's a wonderful, I'm really happy for you. Like, I'm really excited for you that you have that in your life. And that, like you said, because you were not willing to give up, you were still available to accept those blessings.
Exactly. I think you said it correctly. I think one thing I did right is that I always made myself available, and I always leveraged everything that I experienced. Like everything I experienced, I leveraged it to bring me to the next level, if you will.
So you told a fabulous story about a series of like external challenges, but since you started on this path and started building your company and pursuing your passion, what has been the biggest internal challenge that you faced, and how did you overcome that internal challenge?
Yeah, I would say that as much as I been super blessed with breakthroughs, the internal challenge was like sort of the karma that came back from compromising finances with my past, because then I had to, pay back, and sometimes people didn't understand. And so it almost seemed like I violated integrity with people I love. And yeah, to be honest with that was probably the hardest thing. However, my intention was always pure. I made promises that I couldn't possibly keep. And because it was just so challenging, and life just took me on like an incredible adventure that it was way out of my control. And so I think that was probably one of the biggest internal challenges that I faced, and that coming back and me facing it and then making changes inside of myself, inside of my integrity and my interactions, inside my integrity with my word. So again, that blessed me in a way, because I have been able to really feel one of the most important things is integrity. But yeah, facing the truth of that would probably be one of the most challenging.
Well, thank you for sharing. That's a really hard thing to talk about. I know especially when people who we care about and who care about us are placed in challenging circumstances in relation to each other. And I really appreciate that you were able to look at that and take that as a lesson for personal growth and for development. You know, like you said a little while ago about being two individuals in a relationship with each other on a mutual path of growth. It sounds like there's a certain amount of independence that comes along with that, and being, I don't know if we're ever truly sure of who we are, but at least centered in who we think we are and want to be, but also that we are able to stand by ourselves and hold the other person or support the other person or be in relationship with the other person, rather than a sort of heavily leveraged or dependent, whether emotionally or otherwise. So I'm just wondering if you've seen, because I know you've done a lot of work in retreats and coaching with people, have you seen those relationship dynamics play out in the work you've been doing?
Oh yeah, for sure. All the work that I'm doing is probably dominating in the area of relationships, especially in our retreats. And it's like real authentic relationships. So basically, we practice this communication where you express what you actually feel rather than what you think, or rather than what sounds nice or what would be effective. It's just more so like, what do you really feel? And what we found is that when people tend to communicate at this level, it's very scary for some people, because then they have to face themselves. And what I mean by that is that if somebody expresses how they feel and the other person gets really mad or really angry or really sad or depressed, and we're in a retreat setting, you see that the person that's being triggered would want to fight. They want to cry. They want to whine. They want to blame the other person. But if the other person that expresses themselves without attachment, obviously in an authentic and in a mindful way, and doesn't feed into the reaction of the other, then the truth will come out and they would mirror the person that is being triggered. And the person that is being triggered to realize, like, wait a second, this person didn't make me mad. I'm making myself mad based off my opinion on how I think this person should treat me. Mm-hmm. You see, so it's always a reflection of us. And at the end of the day, the advancement of communication is not taking anything personally and being in charge of our feelings. So if somebody comes at us, we can get triggered, but how we decide to process that, we can say, oh, thank you for triggering me. I didn't know that. I still was feeling this. And you can process it and totally own it and take your power back. Because a lot of people are giving their power away because they're scared, and they've given their power away their whole life, sort of in the society that we've grown up in. It's just, here's my power. You have power over me. I'm not taking responsibility. You did this to me. You said that to me. What I found is that the more and more I didn't take other people's opinions personally, and the more and more I took every time I get triggered an opportunity to grow, less and less opinionated people are coming at me. More positivity is coming at me, because you can't even be in the same life experience if you're not feeding back into that negativity or that manipulation.
It made so much sense. It's so fascinating and awesome that you are able to and have been able to witness and also facilitate. One of the phrases that's in your video is facilitating transformation, which is really cool. And I love that you are speaking about communication, especially from a vulnerable and authentic place, which is especially difficult because it's definitely against the stream in our culture, from a perspective of collaboration and partnership rather than it being a contest or a battle in some way. This is how I'm feeling authentically, and then putting that out into the ether, and then the person's like, oh, this is how I'm feeling authentically, and like working through it sort of together is really inspiring to me.
Yes, for sure. And it's not necessarily easy, but it's very simple, because when you stick together through we call it a Funcomfortable conversation. When you stick together, you get so much deeper, because we see that when we facilitate these spaces, you start to notice that, hey, one person may feel something in one moment, and then it might pass. And so it's not necessarily that significant. But if we can hear each other, honor each other's feelings, and not be attached to it, then you see a lot of transcendence real quick. And it's all about taking personal responsibility to how you feel, but also speaking mindfully, like communicating your boundaries, communicating your requests, asking for what you want and not being attached to it. So there's all these little intricacies and little subtleties of communication, but it will really heal us in so many ways, because a lot of the times people, again, are reflections of us and reflections of parts of us that we may be suppressing or resenting that can come out. And so again, if we can celebrate when we're triggered rather than be afraid of it, then we can transcend it.
That's a great reframing. And I think it's so helpful, like you talked about with change, if you anticipate, okay, the next time I'm triggered, here's what I'm going to do. So you have a plan, and then in the moment, doesn't feel so out of control, but rather, oh, right, now is the time to celebrate. I love your framing of that. So you've shared some amazing pieces of wisdom on communication and knowing yourself and developing yourself. I'm wondering if there's any other advice that you would give to millennials who are also on this journey towards fulfillment and success.
I would say that to any millennial, we're living in a time that is much different than our parents. We're living in a time that is much different than the old world. This is a time where information is being transferred faster than ever, where money is being distributed differently, where you can take any creative idea, passion, or expression and actually make money doing it with people from all over the world. You have a time right now that is so possible for you to create anything, the lifestyle that you desire to live in. And so I understand that the millennials, like myself, grew up of a major transition in the world. And so we still have maybe some old conditionings and fears and thoughts of like safety, let me get this job, let me get the finances. And as you see time and time again, that's not going to make you safe, and it's not going to make you happy. What's going to make you safe is your adaptability, is your skills, is your value, is your understanding of yourself and the world, is how open your heart is, how much can you love through the fear. You're more safe by going into the unknown, in my opinion. And what I would say is that as you go on this quest, there's no reason not to find and seek your freedom. You'll see that it's much quicker than you think if you actually go for it 100%. So the advice would be like, go all in, take the alternative route, because there's alternative paths to any experience that you want. There's alternative solutions to every problem. And then I would say that as you go along this path, never forget that what you're seeking is necessarily the end goal. What you're going to find is that you're going to find yourself having to face yourself in different life experiences. And you come to a spiritual quest in this life experience, in this human evolution. You're going to find your spirituality by how you approach these experiences and transcend them. And so don't be afraid of being afraid, and remember that there's a deeper meaning in it all, and you'll find meaning by helping other people. So getting out of yourself and helping other people. And sometimes you have to be by yourself to help other people. So everyone has a different expression of that. Another piece of advice would be play your role. And what I mean is that just because maybe your mentor or somebody that you're inspired by is like the star that's making $1 million and you think that would be cool, that may not be your role. That might be a fantasy, right? So you may be the facilitator behind the scenes, and that's where your success lies. So you may be the writer rather than the speaker. So you have to obviously go out and experience to see what your role is. But eventually you're going to have to find your voice and honor your own truth and realize that, hey, the fantasies or the ideas of the people that inspired me, at one point they're going to become irrelevant as you step up into your own self. And then you start to shape your path around your feelings, around what you feel is your highest and strongest path. And it might be completely different.
There is so much wisdom in everything that you're saying. And I also just want to say that when you said, give it 100%, I was just thinking that means you need to Frank J it.
Frank J.
I had the exact same thought. I was like silently like fist bumping the sky. I was like, Frank J, this is why you're our spirit animal. Like,
yeah, because it's so wonderful too, because you've been giving the world gifts in the form of videos and like photos and everything that you're taking, where you are literally embodying giving it 100%. You are like jumping out of planes and off of waterfalls and like just everything. And it's such amazing imagery, you know, embodied metaphor really for everything. And I don't know, I'm excited for you. And like, that was a great conversation. I'd love to hear about your morning routine. So what do you do in the mornings to set yourself up so that you know that your day is going to be awesome?
So with my travels, I tend to get thrown off, you know, so I'm never really in a routine long enough to like solidify any kind of consistent routine. However, I definitely rededicate as soon as possible to a morning routine. It is incredibly important to set ourselves up in the day. Incredibly important to have that dedication to discipline the mind and the emotions and the physical body. Because what I think is that the mind, the emotions, and the body, how we know we're not just that is because they can be manipulated. And so we go out through our day, depending on what we eat or feel biologically, it will affect the emotions, and it will be difficult to center the emotions. And that feeling or that emotion will affect our thinking pattern. So when you feel sad, you will think very differently, whereas if you felt excited. And so basically we're manipulated by our environment. And what's really cool is that I think that at a deeper level, the real feeling of us lies around the electromagnetic field around the body. It's the awareness within us. It's like the blueprint, like the essence of a human being. That's what I feel like the real human being is. And so with that essence, that awareness, you can choose different actions to set yourself up and manipulate your own body or persuade your own body, mind, and emotions to operate in a way that is your highest possibility. So by doing that, what I tend to do is wake up early most of the time. Sometimes I need rest, but most of the time I like to wake up early before everyone else is up. That already makes me feel strong and makes me feel dedicated. I definitely take a polar plunge or a cold shower for more than 1 to 3 minutes, ideally, and just really sit in that, and that changes my state. And then I do a meditation, some sort of meditation. I like to be flexible. I really love spontaneity, but essentially the meditation is designed to either slow down my thinking and pay attention to my body and just be aware of the energy within my body. I'm really into heart meditations, so I concentrate on my heart. And scientifically, they show like you can go from an incoherent state, so basically the energy fluctuations throughout your body are sporadic and incoherent, to a coherent state where it's in rhythm that raises the cognitive function of your brain by concentrating on your heart, breathing in on a fixed rhythm in a smooth way. So say, for example, you breathe in for 4 seconds and you're out for 6. In for 4 and out for 6. In for 4, out for 6. And you just do a few sets of that while concentrating on your heart. Instantaneously, you put yourself into energetic alignment. So I habitually concentrate on my heart throughout the day. So that's what I'll do. I'll do a polar plunge, and I will do a meditation. And that may look very differently, but that's what I do in the morning.
Man, you are a brave man with that polar plunge. I gotta say.
It feels good.
And is there a motivational quote or book that has really changed your life?
There's many quotes and many books that have changed my life, to answer accurately. Not a quote that's coming to my mind. And I think that this is something that I realize now, that my life, what life? Because I've lived many lives, and I think y'all have as well, and I think most people do. So like the book that changed my life in this current segment of my life is very different than the book that changed my life 4 years ago. So I died and transformed multiple times, and I believe that we're always on the approaching death. Now the people that are developing themselves consciously, they're moving quicker. Right? They're moving quicker, they're having more life experiences, they're changing quicker, so they're dying and transforming again and again. Whereas if someone's like grown up in like downtown Arkansas, you know, and on like a farm or something, and like, you know, they have like a slow moving reality, they're not really dying. They kind of stay the same for a longer amount of time. Maybe their physical death is their actual death and transformation, but I think we can die before our physical body dies. So I would say the most current book, or the first book that changed me, that really impacted me, was The Power of Now. That was the first book that really impacted my life. Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. And
one for us as well. Yeah.
And the most current one would be Life Was Never Meant to Be a Struggle by Stuart Wilde.
Well, Frank J., thank you so much for being with us today. Would you share with our audience where they can find you and your work?
Sure, and I would also love to give your audience a gift as well. If you go to frankjay.tv, that's my website, and you can download a free downloadable mixtape called Unavoidable Success, 16 tracks that fuel your spirit. And so they're basically perspectives and inspiration and information. It's an audio program that you can have if you want to start a relationship with me by leaving your email, and then we can stay in touch. Yeah, and then if any one of your audience was curious in working with me privately, you can go on my site and fill out an application and open up a conversation about that as well.
Great. And thank you for the gift for the audience. And also, I'd love to encourage people to check out your public Facebook page. You have some great videos on there where you are fully embodied in your amazing element and just living life to the fullest. And it's so inspirational. Ivy and I definitely have gone on there every once in a while just when we need that pick me up. And we're like, okay, now it's time to Frank J it.
I really appreciate y'all. I really appreciate our connection. I intend to continue being brothers and sisters on this path. And I really admire you, Ivy and Blake, for following your path and following your truth with courage. Yeah, thank you.
Welcome to the after show for our conversation with Frank Jay Porcaro. It was really awesome.
Yeah. I hope he didn't get offended that I called him our spirit animal, but really, if I think our dream vision had a mascot, it would be Frank J.
Yeah, he just has this amazing ease with his energy and an amazing authenticity. And I really appreciate him affirming all of our bravery, but really, like, there's such a... It just feels so natural coming from him. I mean, to your point, when we're thinking about who we want to be for our audience, he's such a great representation of that because there is that authenticity and that bravery and that passion and excitement and totally unashamed of pursuing happiness. I mean, that's brilliant too. So anyway, it's just been a unique perspective that we've had because we met Frank J 2 years ago and then I've been friends with him and like seen him grow. We've been growing together. So it's a very unique perspective, which I think is in part why we're such big cheerleaders of him as well.
It's true. We literally sat down with him for lunch at the Youth Speaker University Rock the Stage training in San Jose. And exactly like he said, at the time he was in his health club and fitness work and just starting on that motivational speaking path. And it's mind blowing to think of how far he's come and how he's changed. I love what he said too about we have these multiple lives we live and we die. And so I'm interested to reflect on my own life later about those different stages in our lives.
Yeah, that's amazing.
What was one of your big takeaways?
Well, the piece that I really wanted to just keep talking about forever and ever was when we were talking about communication, interpersonal relationships, collaboration, and the Funcomfortable conversation. I can say anyone who's been in interpersonal relationship with me can attest to my liberal use of the Funcomfortable conversation. I have, even for years in my life, been okay with talking about the hard things, talking about the hard things within myself or within a relationship or a friendship. But I will say that I hadn't developed such a clear understanding of the importance of that or what it can look like and what it can mean until the past year or so when I started doing coactive coach training. The courses, there's 5 courses, 5 weekends, where you're really learning how to do relationships and communication differently. You're doing that through the lens of how am I a coach with this client, but you have to learn how relationships can look as a collaborative partnership rather than in this particular lens, I'm the coach and I have all the knowledge and I'm going to tell you everything and you go do this. Sort of teacher-student dynamic. But in a broader sense, I have come to realize that those sorts of, they don't have to be uncomfortable and the uncomfortable, but sometimes they can be. But in those conversations where each person is bringing their own authentic self, the 100% self, it's going to be messy. Your authentic self may not be right, quote unquote, or there is no right, that's the whole point, is that however you are feeling, the truth of what you're feeling in that moment is what's right. And if both of us together in an interpersonal interaction can look at the goal not to be, I need to make sure that you understand that I'm right, or I need to defend myself because I'm right, or I didn't do anything wrong. If the goal in and of itself is to deepen the relationship and to deepen the trust, then the means and the end are the same. Mm-hmm. Because through the process of collaborative communication, I suppose I'll call it that, you are deepening the relationship and deepening the trust. So it doesn't even matter what the subject matter was, or what the instance was, or whether you said this particular syntax and that's not what I meant by that syntax or whatever. But it's the process in and of itself of listening and validating one another and their experiences and looking at it through that way is what ultimately can deepen any relationship that you have with your family, friends, romantic, otherwise. It takes it to this whole new level. And I have such a deeper and profound understanding and respect for that than I had even just, 6 months ago. And I think that Frank Jay's work just really brought it to mind and was very succinct sort of explanation of how that has been for me.
Yeah, I think that concept is foreign for a lot of people, and was for myself up until recently for a couple of reasons. One, there aren't necessarily a lot of models of that type of communication in society and most of our lives, because it is challenging. I mean, the discomfort is real, and our biology is designed to avoid discomfort. So few people voluntarily want to create those kind of conversations without the larger frame that you mentioned, which is that this is actually in service of the relationship or the goals or the outcome of what you're trying to create together or being together. And that framework seems to really require a lot of mutual agreement. And I'm thinking specifically about your coaching clients. Like, you set up with your clients, this is what coaching is, this is what the relationship is going to be like, and not that specific, the specific relationship is going to be however you and your client create that relationship together. But it's this idea that you are consciously and explicitly co-creating that relationship, and defining and saying, how would you like me to provide challenging feedback, or I don't know how you'd say it, but
hard truths. That's what I would call it.
Yeah. How would you like me to present hard truths, if you would? And so it's rare to have conversations about how to have conversations with people in our lives. So I love that you have explored this area and are really developing professionally in this area where you are doing that on a daily basis.
Yeah, and I definitely think that to have those, to your point of it being uncomfortable, it goes to the work of Brené Brown in being vulnerable and the bravery that it takes to be vulnerable. It's amazing that we have this tendency to think of vulnerability as weakness, but the more vulnerable we are and true to ourselves, the more we build up this incredible strength and this incredible endurance. And that applies to our relationships. So even though it can be uncomfortable to come into a conversation and say, I'm sorry, I know even saying I'm sorry sometimes can be very challenging for people, because there may be some shame or guilt associated with having made a mistake in the first place. So there's some bravery and courage in saying, I apologize, and being authentic about that and true about that. Not just saying it because you think that's what the other person wants to hear, but you're saying it because, wow, that shadow part of me came out and that's not what I intended, or that hurt me or whatever. That can be part of the discomfort, but it's also part of what can be so incredibly magical and valuable when you have that kind of container and relationship with your friends, or I see it in the coaching relationship as well. I mean, it's very specifically designed relationship, which is why it's a professional relationship in a way. But, these same principles apply, I believe, to our interpersonal relationships, any interpersonal relationship that we have.
For sure. I think it requires bravery too, because many of us have often been punished for being vulnerable in the past. Like we've shared how we really feel, and someone's yelled at us or gotten mad at us, or a parent has punished us, or a teacher or a coach has said something to us. So I think it can be really easy to say, you know what, it's just easier if I don't share how I actually feel at any point. And I think especially for men, there's a lot of pressure around that as well, although women certainly too are also the recipients of a lot of shame and guilt around vulnerability.
Yeah. But ultimately, it's a wise and beautiful path to take, practicing vulnerability and seeing where it can take you in all areas of your life. Mm-hmm. So what about you? What was your big takeaway?
I had so many. Frank J is like a fountain of great takeaways.
He is.
I really appreciated what he was saying about safety, and specifically when he was talking about advice to give millennials. Safety is an illusion, and I think we all have our personal threshold of how much safety feels like enough. Because the reality is there is massive uncertainty on every level of our lives every day. From the interplanetary, a giant comet could come and destroy Earth tomorrow that NASA somehow missed. I believe in you, NASA. Don't let us down. But, or alternatively, something very tiny, a microbe. We could get an illness that we would never have suspected or known about just from touching a random surface or eating or drinking something.
Well, that's freaking me out.
Well, not to make everyone paranoid
now.
on a macro and micro level. That's right. But this is my point, right?
Yeah.
You could be afraid of everything and anything around you at any point in the day, but we draw these internal lines in our mind of, okay, this is enough of a risk tolerance that I can manage my life under this risk. And if it goes beyond that, then I freak out. I'm scared. I'm overwhelmed. I feel uncentered. I feel afraid. But I think something he hit on, he didn't necessarily say this explicitly, but I think the core of the message was we're creating those boundaries in our minds. We might think, oh my gosh, if I couldn't pay my rent, my life would be over. Frank J is living out of his car, trying to become a motivational speaker. Mm-hmm. And that's not to say that anyone's safety threshold for them is wrong. There are plenty of reasons why we have those safety thresholds, and some of them are actually really important to protect us. But I think it's acknowledging that if we become conscious of what those thresholds are, then we can take deliberate action where we say, you know what, normally I wouldn't be comfortable taking this risk or trying this adventure or pursuing this passion. But if I recognize that I can consciously push my limit and my boundary on this, then what amazing things we can accomplish. And I think Frank J really is the embodiment of accomplishing those amazing things.
Yeah, I think there's definitely something to what he said about getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. When I think back to one of the first very meaningful times that I stepped out of my comfort zone, it was just doing team building activities in undergrad in this organization I was a part of, because I was so shy, right? But after I did that and saw that everything was okay, it's not like I suddenly became this person who absolutely loved team building. Okay, I did over time, but and I still love them even now. But that started in me, I think, this sequence of getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, because what's possible for you, what opportunities are available to you, all of that is on the other side of fear. Mm-hmm. All of that is on the other side of our discomfort. And when you get used to stepping over that, like I'm imagining a line, you know, like a very clear barrier, and it's like you go over it and you're like, and sometimes you're like walking across coals or something, and that's your fear. But you get over there and you're like, holy mackerel, not only oftentimes are you in a place where you see the world differently, which again, if you allow yourself the opportunity to be grateful for it, you're seeing the world differently in a positive way. But then also you get to look back and say, oh my gosh, look how far I came. I walked across all of those coals and I'm here and now it's amazing.
And now it's amazing is the real point, because what is the impetus to get through that fear and to step over those coals and to come on the other side? Because I think if you ask a lot of people, hey, do you want to change the way you're thinking about yourself in the world? They'd say, not really. You know? I'm really comfortable.
What do you mean change it?
Exactly. But I think your focus on, and now on the other side is that fulfillment. It doesn't mean it's easy on the other side. It doesn't mean it's perfect, because those don't exist. But what it means is what an incredible opportunity to fulfill and have amazing experiences that you never would have known if you hadn't tried. And that the reason I emphasize that so much is I think we can look at a possible better future and say, that would be nice, but it's so scary and it feels so dangerous to pursue that I'm not going to take that risk. I'm just going to stay where I am because this is known, even if it's not perfect. But the growth opportunities always happen when we are willing to like take those jumps.
Yeah, and I also think that it's important, and I don't know if this is like a disagreement or this is a yes and, but I also think it's important to note that sometimes you might throw yourself into the fire of fear and change, for example. And sometimes you're going to go through that. I heard this on an episode of Magic Lessons with Liz Gilbert. Can't remember the number right now, but point being, when you, I don't want people to think that this is my quote because I don't want to like, yes, I thought of this, but you know, when you go into that fire, you may reach it and it's like, you're like, holy crap, I'm warm, I'm amazing, it's better than I ever thought possible. Or there really might be failure or challenge or heartbreak that comes in it. But the point is that you can find fulfillment in the fact that you honored yourself in the first place, in the fact that you took that step and that you were brave in the first place. Sometimes the fulfillment doesn't have to necessarily come from the outcome being exactly what you expected, right? But the outcome is, holy crap, you have grown as a human because you did something that you otherwise wouldn't. So it's like a yes and.
Yeah, and Frank J talked about that too. You said it's really about the process.
Yeah.
And focusing on the process. So I'm in agreement.
Yeah, this is a great after show.
This was
so much
and
energy.
A great episode.
Yeah.
Frank J is an inspirational dude. He's sometimes just doing handstands without a shirt in a field of grass because that's like his jam.
That's him. Yeah.
Exactly.
That's so awesome.
And that's inspiring. So we appreciate you joining us for this magical carpet ride with Frank J. And we hope that some of his wisdom will inspire you this week to do something fun, comfortable, to really think about how you perceive your boundaries and limits and see if there isn't something perhaps that you can do this week to explore a potential opportunity or a passion in a way you might not have thought possible for yourself. And with that
feels good.
That's right. So remember, Frank J it sometime today. For show notes and upcoming guests, or to learn more about Coactive Coaching, the blog, and our other awesome offerings, visit motivationalmillennial.com. Keep in touch with us at facebook.com/motivationalmillennial.
We'd love to hear from you. Shoot us an email with your thoughts, comments, and suggestions at podcast@motivationalmillennial.com. And tell us who you might like to hear from, or if you think you or anyone you know would be good for the show.
The Motivational Millennial Podcast is edited by Christy Hostler and Team Podcast.
Our theme music was composed and performed by Blake Brandis. Have a great week, Motivational Millennials!